4 days. Just 4 more days, and I'd finally make it. After 29 years of loyal service, I was about to retire with full benefits. But then, I got called into a meeting that changed everything. My name is Marcus Bell, and at 64 years old, I thought I had seen it all. For nearly 3 decades, I had walked through the glass doors of Harrogate Systems every morning at 7:30 sharp, my coffee still steaming in its worn ceramic mug. As the head of infrastructure management at this tech company in Cedar Falls, Minnesota. I had watched the business transform from a small startup into a regional powerhouse. I had been there for every server upgrade, every network expansion, every crisis that threatened to bring our systems down. I had never taken a sick day I didn't absolutely need, never missed a deadline, never given them a reason to question my dedication. The building had changed around me over the years. What started as a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and concrete floors had evolved into a sleek corporate campus with glass conference rooms and ergonomic workstations. Young employees came and went, some staying a few months, others a few years, but I remained constant. I was the institutional memory, the guy who knew where every cable ran and why certain servers were configured the way they were. I was proud of that stability, especially after losing my wife Sarah to cancer 7 years ago. Work had become my anchor, my purpose, my way of making sense of a world that suddenly felt empty without her laugh echoing through our small house on Maple Street. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was counting down to retirement like a kid waiting for summer vacation. But this wasn't about escaping work. It was about finally having the security to breathe properly, to travel to the places Sarah and I had always talked about visiting, to spend time with my grandson Tommy, and maybe teach him how to build something with his hands in the workshop I'd been promising to set up for years. I had done my homework. According to the employee handbook that had been my Bible for nearly 3 decades, I needed either 30 years of service or to reach age 65 for full retirement benefits. At 64, with 29 years and 361 days of service, I was cutting it close, but I was going to make it. The pension calculator showed I'd receive $3,147 per month, plus full medical coverage, enough to live comfortably and honor the promises I'd made to Sarah about not working myself into the ground. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I arrived at my usual time, nodded to Janet at the reception desk, and settled into my office with its familiar view of the parking lot where I'd watched seasons change for decades. My computer hummed to life, and I began reviewing the overnight system reports when my phone rang. Marcus, could you come to conference room B when you have a moment? The voice belonged to Jennifer Walsh, the HR director who had replaced my old friend Deborah Kane when she left for private practice 2 years ago. There was something different in Jennifer's tone, a careful politeness that made my stomach tighten. Of course, give me 5 minutes to finish this report. Actually, Marcus, could you come now? Mr. Locke is waiting. Darren Locke, the new CEO who had been brought in 6 months ago to modernize operations and drive growth. At 35, he was younger than some of the servers I maintained, with an MBA from an Ivy League school and a vocabulary full of buzzwords like synergy and optimization. He had already implemented what he called efficiency measures, a fancy way of saying he'd laid off a dozen people from various departments and consolidated their responsibilities. I saved my work, straightened my tie, and walked down the hallway that had become as familiar as the path from my bedroom to my kitchen. Conference room P was where we held our quarterly all-hands meetings, where I'd given presentations about infrastructure upgrades to rooms full of executives who nodded politely while checking their phones. When I opened the door, the scene felt wrong immediately. Darren sat at the head of the long table in his expensive suit, his laptop open in front of him. Jennifer was to his right, a manila folder placed precisely in front of her, her hands folded on top of it. Neither of them smiled when I entered. Marcus, please have a seat, Darren said, gesturing to the chair across from him. His voice had that practiced calm that people use when they're about to deliver bad news they've rehearsed. I sat down, my mind racing through possibilities. Had I missed something critical? Made an error that cost the company money? In 29 years, I'd never been called into a meeting like this. Marcus, I want to start by saying that this isn't easy. Darren began. his fingers steepled in front of him. You've been a dedicated employee, and your service to Harrogate has been substantial. The word substantial hung in the air like a question mark. Not exceptional or invaluable, substantial. Like I was a piece of furniture they were trying to find a polite way to describe. However, he continued, and I felt my chest tighten because nothing good ever followed that word. We're implementing a significant restructuring of our operations. We need to streamline our workforce and reduce operational overhead to remain competitive in today's market. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that wasn't coming. I'm sorry, what exactly are you saying? Jennifer opened the folder and slid a document across the table. Marcus, your position is being eliminated effective immediately. This is your separation agreement. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked down at the papers, but the letters seemed to swim on the page. Eliminated? I'm being fired? Let's call it a workforce reduction, Darren said, as if the euphemism made it less devastating. Your institutional knowledge has been valuable, but we're moving toward more automated systems that require different skill sets. I found my voice, though it sounded strange to my own ears. 4 days. I'm 4 days away from full retirement benefits. I understand the timing is unfortunate, Darren replied, not meeting my eyes. But business decisions can't always align with personal timelines. Unfortunate. 29 years of my life, and he called it unfortunate. The severance package is quite generous, Jennifer added, tapping the document. 2 weeks pay plus unused vacation time, and of course, you'll be eligible for COBRA health insurance continuation. 2 weeks pay versus a lifetime pension. COBRA versus full medical coverage. The mathematics of cruelty laid out in corporate speak. I looked at these two people, one young enough to be my son, the other someone I'd shared coffee with in the break room hundreds of times, and felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, pure, helpless rage. But I also felt something else, the weight of my wife's voice reminding me that dignity was something nobody could take away unless you let them. I see, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. And this decision is final? I'm afraid so, Darren said. You'll need your badge and any company property before you leave today. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting after years of climbing around server rooms and crawling under desks. I reached into my wallet and pulled out the badge I'd carried for 29 years, its magnetic strip worn smooth from daily use. I placed it on the table with the care someone might use to lay a flower on a grave. Next came the keys. Keys to server rooms, storage closets, the building itself. Keys that had made me feel trusted, essential, part of something larger than myself. Each one made a small metallic sound as I placed it beside the badge. There's just one more thing, I said, looking directly at Darren. In all my years here, through every crisis and every challenge, I never once asked this company for anything I hadn't earned. I never called in sick unless I was genuinely ill. I never left a job half-finished. I never asked for recognition or special treatment. I just did my work and trusted that loyalty would be rewarded with loyalty. Darren shifted uncomfortably in his chair. So I want you to know, I continued, that this conversation will stay with me for the rest of my life. Not because I'm bitter. Bitterness is a luxury I can't afford at my age, but because it's taught me something important about the difference between a job and a calling, between a company and a community. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Mr. Itlock, that server in the north wing that's been running hot, the one your IT team can't figure out, it's the cooling unit on the third rack. The sensor's been miscalibrated for 2 months. You might want to fix that before it takes down your entire customer database. I left them sitting there and walked out of the building where I'd spent more than half my adult life. The drive home was a blur of familiar streets that suddenly looked different, like seeing your neighborhood after a long vacation. Everything was the same, but I was fundamentally changed. I pulled into my driveway, the same driveway where Sarah and I had stood watching for the school bus when our daughter was young, where we'd planned garden layouts and discussed weekend projects, and sat in my car for a long time. Inside the house, silence greeted me like an old friend. I made coffee out of habit, then sat at my kitchen table with the separation agreement spread out in front of me. The legal language was dense, full of clauses about non-disclosure and non-compete agreements. But the essential message was clear. Sign this, take your 2 weeks' pay, and disappear quietly. But something nagged at me. I went to my home office, really just a converted bedroom where I kept my personal files, and pulled out the accordion folder where I'd stored every important document from my career. Pay stubs, performance reviews, benefit statements, copies of emails, even the original offer letter from 1995 when Harrogate was still called Cedar Valley Technical Solutions. I spread everything out chronologically and began to build a timeline. What I found made my blood run cold. According to the separation agreement, my employment was recorded as beginning on March 18, 1995. But my original offer letter was dated March 14, 1995, and my first day had been March 15th. I remembered it clearly because it was Sarah's birthday, and I'd taken her to dinner that night to celebrate both her birthday and my new job. 3 days. They'd shorted me 3 days, which meant, according to their records, I had 29 years and 358 days of service, not 361, still short of the 30-year requirement for full benefits. I went through every document again, cross-referencing dates, pay periods, vacation time. The discrepancy was consistent across multiple documents that had been updated in the HR system over the years. Someone had systematically altered my employment records. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. If anyone would know about the legal implications of this, it would be Deborah Kane. She'd been Harrogate's HR director for 15 years before leaving to become a labor law consultant. More importantly, she'd been a friend. Marcus? Deborah's voice carried genuine surprise. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Aren't you supposed to be retiring any day now? That's what I thought too, I said, and then I told her everything. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, Deborah spoke, and her voice had shifted into what I recognized as her professional mode. Marcus, what you're describing could be a violation of ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. If they deliberately manipulated your employment records to deny you benefits you're entitled to, that's fraud. Federal fraud. What does that mean, exactly? It means you need to get down here with every document you have. Can you be at my office tomorrow morning? That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Sarah, about how she'd handled her cancer diagnosis with such grace and determination. She'd never complained about the unfairness of it, never asked why me. She'd simply focused on what needed to be done and done it with dignity. I tried to channel that same resolve as I prepared for what I suspected would be a long fight. Deborah's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, all hardwood floors and tall windows. She'd traded her corporate suits for more casual attire, but her sharp intelligence was unchanged. She listened as I walked through my timeline, occasionally asking clarifying questions, taking notes in her precise handwriting. The pattern is clear, she said after I'd finished. And you're probably not the only one. Companies don't usually develop this kind of sophisticated scheme for just one employee. What do you mean? Think about it. Darren's been there 6 months implementing efficiency measures. He's probably identified every employee close to full retirement benefits and found ways to eliminate them before they become eligible. It's a cost-saving strategy that's both heartless and illegal. She was right. Over the past few months, I'd heard whispers about other longtime employees being let go. Tom Henderson from accounting, Maria Gonzalez from customer service, Bill Patterson from sales, all of them within a year or two of retirement eligibility. So what do? We file a complaint with the Department of Labor. They take ERISA violations very seriously, especially when there's evidence of systematic fraud. But Marcus, I need you to understand, this is going to be a process. It could take months, maybe longer, and companies like Harrogate have expensive lawyers who'll fight this every step of the way. I thought about Sarah again, about the months of chemotherapy when she never once complained about the discomfort or the uncertainty. If she could face cancer with courage, I could face corporate lawyers. Let's do it. Over the next 2 weeks, Deborah and I built a case that would have made a prosecutor proud. We documented not just my situation, but patterns across the entire company. We found email threads discussing legacy employee optimization and spreadsheets calculating savings from accelerated workforce transitions. The paper trail was extensive because, as Deborah pointed out, corporate executives love to document their cleverness. The Department of Labor moved faster than I'd expected. Within a month, investigators were at Harrogate requesting documents and interviewing employees. That's when Darren Locke made his first mistake. He tried to have the computer servers updated while the investigation was ongoing, claiming it was routine maintenance. What he didn't know was that one of his IT staff, a young woman named Kelly who'd always been friendly to me, had backed up the email servers before the maintenance began. Kelly contacted me through Deborah's office. She'd found email chains that laid out the entire scheme in corporate black and white. Not only had they targeted me and several other employees, but they'd actually created a scoring system ranking legacy employees by potential savings if they were eliminated before benefit eligibility. The subject lines alone were damning. Q4 Workforce Streamlining Initiative. Legacy Employee Cost Analysis. Optimal Separation Timing. My name appeared on multiple spreadsheets with calculations showing exactly how much money the company would save by firing me 4 days before my benefits kicked in. But the email that sealed Darren's fate was one he'd sent to the board of directors. By implementing strategic workforce reductions focused on high-benefit legacy employees, we can reduce annual benefit obligations by approximately $2.4 million while maintaining operational efficiency. Strategic workforce reductions, high-benefit legacy employees, the language of corporate sociopathy distilled into bullet points and cost savings. The Department of Labor referred the case to the Justice Department. What had started as a civil matter was now a criminal investigation. Deborah explained that when companies systematically defraud employees of their benefits, it becomes a federal crime with serious consequences. That's when my phone rang at 7:30 on a Thursday morning. I recognized the number. It was Darren's direct line. "Marcus, I hope I'm not calling too early." His voice was different, smaller somehow, lacking the confident authority he displayed in that conference room. "Not at all. I've been up for hours. Listen, I think there might have been some misunderstandings about your departure from Harrogate. I'd like to discuss the possibility of a more comprehensive settlement." Comprehensive settlement, even when offering a bribe. He couldn't speak like a human being. "What kind of settlement?" "Well, we could potentially restore your full service record and provide the retirement benefits you were expecting, plus perhaps some additional compensation for the inconvenience." Inconvenience. As if destroying my retirement plans was like delivering a late pizza. And all I'd have to do is what exactly? Just sign a revised agreement and withdraw any complaints you might have filed with regulatory agencies. I looked out my kitchen window at the bird feeders Sarah had insisted on hanging from the oak tree. A cardinal was perched there, bright red against the morning sky. She'd always said cardinals were messengers from people we'd lost, that seeing one meant someone was watching over us. "Darren, I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to have to decline." "Marcus, please think about this carefully. Legal proceedings can be very stressful, very uncertain. This way, everyone gets what they want. The thing is, Darren, I don't think you understand what I want. I don't just want my benefits back, though I certainly intend to get them. I want to make sure you never do this to anyone else. I think you're making a mistake. I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, but standing up for what's right isn't one of them." I hung up and called Deborah immediately. She wasn't surprised by Darren's offer. In fact, she'd been expecting it. "Means they're scared," she said. "Companies don't offer to restore benefits and pay additional compensation unless they know they're in serious legal trouble." The investigation continued to expand. Federal agents interviewed dozens of current and former employees. The local newspaper picked up the story, running a front-page article with the headline, "Local Tech Company Under Federal Investigation for Benefit Fraud." The story included a photo of the Harrogate building that I'd entered and exited thousands of times, now looking somehow smaller and less impressive. Reading the article felt surreal. There was my name in print, identified as the whistleblower who exposed the scheme. Whistleblower, a word I'd never imagined would apply to me. I'd always thought of whistleblowers as crusading activists or disgruntled employees seeking revenge. I was just a guy who wanted the retirement benefits he'd earned. The article also revealed the scope of the scheme. At least 12 employees had been terminated in the past year under suspicious circumstances, all within months of benefit eligibility. The total amount of benefits they'd been denied was estimated at over $4 million. 2 days after the article ran, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a woman about my age with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "Mr. Bell, I'm Maria Gonzalez. I used to work in customer service at Harrogate." I remembered Maria. She'd been with the company almost as long as I had. Always had a friendly word when we passed in the hallways. "They fired me 8 months ago," she continued. "Said it was a restructuring, but I was only 6 months away from full benefits. I saw the article in the paper, and I wondered if maybe..." "Come in," I said. "Let me make some coffee." Maria's story was heartbreakingly similar to mine. 26 years with the company, exemplary performance reviews, then suddenly eliminated in a restructuring just before benefit eligibility. She'd accepted it as bad luck, used her savings to get by, found a part-time job at a local retailer that barely covered her rent. "I thought about fighting it," she said, "but I didn't know how, and I was afraid if I made trouble, they'd say bad things about me to other employers." By the end of the week, I'd heard from 5 other former employees with similar stories. We started meeting at my house, sharing our experiences, comparing documents. What emerged was a clear pattern of targeting employees based on their proximity to benefit eligibility. The emotional toll on these people was devastating. Tom Henderson, the accountant, had been forced to take early Social Security at a reduced rate. Bill Patterson had lost his health insurance just as his wife was diagnosed with diabetes. Each story was a reminder that corporate efficiency measures had human faces and real consequences. The day of reckoning came on a cold November morning. I was in my workshop, finally starting on the desk I'd promised to build for my grandson, when Deborah called. "Turn on Channel 7, she said. "Now." I went inside and turned on the television to see a news reporter standing in front of the Harrogate building. Behind her, federal agents were escorting someone out of the building in handcuffs. It took me a moment to recognize Darren Locke without his expensive suit and confident posture. He looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed behind his back, his MBA worthless in the face of federal fraud charges. The reporter's voice provided the soundtrack. Darren Locke, CEO of Harrogate Systems, was arrested this morning on 11 counts of employee benefit fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The charges stem from an investigation into systematic manipulation of employee records to deny retirement benefits. I sat down heavily in my recliner, the same chair where Sarah and I used to watch the evening news together, where she dozed during her chemo treatments, where I'd sat alone for the past 7 years, wondering what to do with the rest of my life. The phone rang constantly over the next few days. Reporters wanting interviews, lawyers wanting to represent me in civil suits, former colleagues expressing support or shock. But the call that mattered most came from Deborah. "The Department of Labor has reached a settlement with Harrogate," she said. "Full restoration of benefits for all affected employees, plus compensatory damages. Marcus, you're going to get your full pension, plus health insurance, plus $200,000 in additional compensation." I felt lightheaded. After months of uncertainty, wondering if I'd end up living on Social Security in a studio apartment, I was going to be financially secure. What about the others? Everyone gets full benefits restored. Maria, Tom, Bill, all of them. Plus, the company has to pay a fine of $3.2 million to the Department of Labor. That evening, I called my daughter Jennifer, named after my mother, not the HR director, and told her the news. She cried on the phone, partly from relief and partly from pride. "Dad, I'm so proud of you for fighting this. Mom would be proud too. I keep thinking about what she'd say if she were here." I told her she'd probably remind me that standing up for what's right isn't heroic. It's just what decent people do. She'd also say that sometimes decent people have to fight indecent systems to protect other decent people. My daughter had inherited her mother's wisdom along with her green eyes. The criminal trial took place the following spring. I testified for 2 days, walking the jury through the evidence, explaining how the scheme had worked, describing its impact on the employees who'd been targeted, Darren's lawyers tried to portray him as a well-intentioned executive who'd made errors in judgment, but the email evidence was overwhelming. He was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 4 years in federal prison plus restitution to the affected employees. The judge's comments during sentencing stayed with me. Mr. Locke, you systematically stole from employees who had given decades of their lives to your company. You didn't just take their money, you took their security, their dignity, and their trust in the basic fairness of the American workplace. 6 months later, I was back in my workshop, putting the finishing touches on Tommy's desk. The cherry wood had taken the stain beautifully, and the brass handles I'd chosen gave it a classic look that would age well. As I worked, I thought about everything that had happened since that Tuesday morning when I'd been called into conference room B. The money was nice, the pension provided security, and the settlement had given me enough to set up college funds for my grandchildren. But what mattered more was knowing that Maria could retire with dignity, that Tom didn't have to choose between his medications and his rent, that Bill's wife could get the medical care she needed. I'd never set out to be a whistleblower or a crusader for justice. I just wanted what I'd earned through 29 years of loyal service. But sometimes, standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone else who's been treated unfairly by people who think power gives them the right to take what doesn't belong to them. The workshop was quiet except for the sound of sandpaper on wood and the distant call of a cardinal outside the window. I smiled, thinking of Sarah and how she'd handled her own fight with grace and determination. I'd learned that you don't have to be a hero to make a difference. You just have to be willing to stand up and say no when someone tries to take what's rightfully yours. The desk was almost finished. In a few days, I'd drive it over to Tommy's house and watch his face light up when he saw it. We'd set it up in his room, and maybe I'd tell him the story of how his grandfather learned that sometimes the most important battles are the ones you fight not just for yourself, but for the principle that fairness and decency should mean something in this world. As I worked, I thought about Darren Locke in his federal prison cell, probably wondering how his carefully planned scheme had unraveled so completely. The answer was simple. He'd underestimated the power of one person who refused to accept that loyalty and dedication could be discarded with a memo and a 2-week severance check. I hadn't done anything particularly heroic or complicated. I'd simply refused to let them take what I'd spent a lifetime earning. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything.